Every Sunday morning, I make my coffee the same exact way, like nothing in the world has changed, even when everything else clearly has. 2 scoops, never 3, measured by instinct more than sight, using the same dented spoon my wife used for decades. The canister still sits on the second shelf above the stove where she left it, and I have never once thought about moving it. Some habits are not routines, they are anchors, and at 64 years old, I have learned you do not pull up anchors unless you are ready to drift. I spent 31 years working as an electrician, the kind of man who understands what runs behind the walls people never think about. I know how systems are supposed to look, how clean lines should be, how everything connects when it is working right. That knowledge saved me one quiet Sunday morning in October, when I reached for my coffee and noticed something that did not belong. Tucked just behind a framed photo of my late wife and me was a small black device, no bigger than a matchbook, with a pinhole lens staring straight into my kitchen. I did not touch it. I did not react. I simply made my coffee, stood at the counter, and stared out at the oak tree in my backyard while the realization settled into my bones. 6 days earlier, my son had come by to fix what he called a leak under the bathroom sink. He stayed for a couple of hours while I sat outside reading, then left with a kiss on my cheek and a promise that everything was taken care of. I trusted him completely, which is why it took me a moment longer than it should have to accept the truth forming in my mind. I walked into the bathroom and opened the cabinet slowly, already knowing what I would find before I saw it. Behind a stack of toilet paper sat another identical device, quiet and patient, recording everything. I closed the cabinet, returned to the kitchen, and sat down at the table with my coffee. My son is 41 years old, successful in commercial real estate, living comfortably with his wife in a house not too far from mine. On the surface, his life looks stable, polished even, but over the past year something in his behavior had shifted in ways I had not fully confronted. They started calling more often, asking questions that sounded caring but felt calculated. They wanted to know if I was eating properly, sleeping well, keeping up with my medications. My daughter-in-law suggested I might be better off in a smaller home, something easier to manage. My son offered to help with my finances, which I politely declined. I had managed my life long before he existed, and I was doing just fine. The truth is, my house is paid off, the property value has grown steadily, and I have enough saved to live comfortably. He knows that. He also knows he is the only one who stands to inherit it. That Sunday, I sat for hours thinking about what those devices meant. I thought about the boy I raised, the one I coached through Little League, the one I carried into the emergency room after he wrecked his dirt bike at 15. Somewhere between that boy and the man who planted cameras in my home, something had changed, and I could not tell when the break happened. I am not a man who cries easily, but I will admit that something inside me cracked that morning. Instead of reacting, I did what I had done my entire career. I diagnosed the problem before touching anything. On Monday, I called my neighbor, Evelyn, a sharp-minded woman who had known me for years, and asked for a favor without explanation. Then I called an old friend, Marcus, who had left the trades years ago to become an attorney specializing in estate law. When I told him what I had found, he went quiet, then told me not to touch anything and not to let on that I knew. He explained what they were likely building toward, a legal move to declare me mentally unfit so they could gain control over my finances and property. A guardianship case built on carefully collected recordings and possibly a questionable medical evaluation. It was not just betrayal, it was strategy. That is when I decided I was going to let them think it was working. For the next 2 weeks, I performed a version of myself that I knew they wanted to see. I spoke out loud to no one, mixing up days, mentioning appointments that did not exist, questioning whether I had paid bills or eaten meals. Nothing dramatic, just enough uncertainty to sound believable. Meanwhile, my son's calls became more frequent, his questions more pointed, and my daughter-in-law started visiting more often, offering to organize my documents while quietly scanning my home. 3 weeks in, Marcus called me with confirmation. A petition had been filed in court, supported by a letter from a doctor I had never met, claiming I was experiencing cognitive decline. The doctor, as it turned out, had lost his license years ago for fraud. My daughter-in-law had submitted the letter, and my son had backed it. That was the moment everything shifted from suspicion to certainty. We planned carefully after that. I invited my son over on a Saturday, acting confused and concerned about some documents. Then I left the house before he arrived, staying at Evelyn's place while hidden cameras I installed captured everything. I even left a fake note about a safety deposit box, knowing it would draw his attention. When I watched the footage later, I saw a man moving through my home with intent, searching, photographing, opening drawers and cabinets like he already believed everything belonged to him. Law enforcement had already been informed, and by Monday morning, both my son and his wife were arrested. The charges were serious, including fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful entry. The case dragged on for months, filled with court dates and quiet moments where I had to sit across from my own child and feel something deeper than anger. He eventually took a plea deal, as did his wife, and the guardianship petition was thrown out entirely. After it was all over, I changed the locks, updated my will, and set up a proper legal trust to protect everything I had built. I removed the devices from my home and sealed them away as evidence. Then I stood in my kitchen, looking at the photo of my wife, and realized that the hardest part was not the betrayal itself. It was accepting that the version of my son I believed in might not have existed the way I thought it did. These days, my life is quieter. I still make my coffee the same way every Sunday morning, still sit at the same table, but I see things more clearly now. I adopted a second dog a few months later, a calm, steady companion who follows me around the house like he understands more than he should. The oak tree in my yard still stands, taller than I remember, its branches no longer meant to carry what they once did. I am not at complete peace, but I am steady, and sometimes that is enough. I did what needed to be done, the same way I handled every problem in my life. Find the fault, isolate it, and fix it without hesitation. And when the work is finished, you sit back, take a breath, and move forward, even if the path ahead looks different than the one you expected.